Richard, John, Rupert, and Hermione. Finally, I am padding in the footsteps of Hermione Granger from Hogwarts, and in the footsteps of Richard the Lionheart, and his brother, King John, who signed the Magna Carta. I wonder if I can catch a fish from the lake in Worcester College, where Hermione was a real-life student. I think there's a lake there. Or is that fake news? It's also the college where Rupert Murdoch studied, and you can never trust a media mogul. I'm going to find out, as I've still got just enough time. Homeward. I couldn't see any fish in the lake, but I'll soon be home and we'll have a good supper with lots of jelly to lick off. My legs are quite tired, all 16 inches of them, but what a day it's been. I make my way back up to the Ashmolean, and as soon as I meet Julia, I hop back into my cat box, glad of the rest, and I start to fall asleep when we get on the bus. Rue doesn't know what he's missed, and I can't wait to see Freddie and Polly. I'll invite them into my garden tomorrow, just so I can show off about my adventures. The Typist's Preface to Part 3. Preparing for Simeon's next trip. The day in question was the 1st of June. Simeon had been on fine form for the 3 intervening weeks, reminiscing about his first day in Oxford and planning his next one. He was keen to work out how best to fill the morning before his lunch appointment. For this, he had pored and indeed pored over street maps, history books, and biographies. A brief history of time defeated him, but he reread Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats and brushed up on Hopkins, Narnia, and Morse. It was clear that he hadn't grasped the difference between fact and fiction, nor between real people, real characters in real stories, and imagined characters in fictional dreams. On top of this, he has no concept of 20th century history. His risible reasoning on why the Norman door of St. Ebbe's could have a cat door in it was handled by Audrey, another of his postgrad friends, with a stroke of genius. She introduced him to Henry de la Barbe's Advanced French for Exceptional Cats, and in such a way that he now sees himself as a special custodian of all things French, from the Norman conquest onwards, in the widest of senses. I often get home to find him rehearsing irregular verbs, or with his nose in Asterix the Gaul. Like most cats, Simeon knows his own mind and believes it to be superior to the mind of others. We've seen how fluent he is in the titles of Latin works, whether Virgil's Aeneid or Alexander Leonard's translation of Winnie the Pooh, but I've learned not to press further. Simeon's stumbling over Jeff the Don's dominoes shows that he hasn't yet grasped the dative case, from which may be safely inferred that he's read nothing at all in Latin. That's Simeon all over, conning with confidence and bravado. He was very keen to meet Morse. I explained that Morse had died on screen in the front quad of Exeter, and that the actor had died in real life. In that case, he would go to a meeting of the Inklings, as he wanted to find out more about Elvish and see if Tolkien had got any of ideas from Cattish. He also wanted to know if Edmund might have any Turkish delight left over from the White Witch in Narnia. Alas, he had missed the Inklings by decades. Had he not, then Lewis at least could have explained that Edmund was fictional. Never mind, he said. he could still meet the White Rabbit. I was sorry that the porter at Christchurch had led him on in this by accepting his note. I told him that Alice had only ever dreamed about the White Rabbit. He argued that I was wrong, that could not be the case. The Cheshire Cat was, after all, in retirement in the Botanical Gardens. How could Alice have met him in Wonderland if there had been no White Rabbit to lead Alice into Wonderland? I had done my best to let him down gently. He would need to find out the hard way. All I could do was to make suggestions of what else he might fit into his afternoon if he had the time. Then once he had given up waiting in the Deanery garden, he would have other things to take his mind off it. I just hoped he wouldn't be too disappointed. As we looked at his morning schedule, he declared, quite rightly, that he needed to make Oxford University Press a priority. We didn't want to take chances with the Hopkins remnant. I mentioned this to Georgina, a friend who lives in Jericho close to the press. We got to know Georgina and Ollie while they were postgraduate students at around the same time as Larissa. They kindly invited Simeon for breakfast. Georgina is as keen as Simeon that the poem be delivered in good order, and said she will walk down with him to OUP's headquarters in Great Clarendon Street. Julia Cameron.